Chicago, Illinois, Startup Hype Man presents the Goat to Market Show. What's up, everyone? I am your host, Raj Nation, the founder and chief pitch artist of Startup Hype Man. This podcast is where we bring you founders, company leaders, and creatives who are building it, who are doing it, who have been there and done that. And they pull back the curtain on their go-to-market strategies so that you can build a venture that you love and become the GOAT of your industry. Want first listen on episodes before anyone else? Subscribe to our newsletter at startuphypeman.com. You will get alerts every Sunday morning when we release new episodes. All right, let's hear how today's guest is becoming the GOAT. Ladies and gentlemen, making her way to the microphone from Washington, D.C., and currently residing in Austin, Texas. She is the GM of innovation at SamCart. Please welcome Olivia Herron.
Hi there.
Welcome to the show, Olivia. As I mentioned, she is Olivia Herron, GM of innovation at SamCart. What is SamCart? Well, if you do anything in e-commerce, you've probably heard of them before. They are the e-commerce platform for creators, helping digital creators maximize their profits, turning their products and services into digital platforms where they can sell their stuff really any place, anywhere, anytime. SamCart has done a lot since their inception, most recently in 2022, raising an $82 million Series B round. They now have 3 different products, and they total 80,000 customers across their 3 different product lines. There's SamCart Standard, there's Creator U, and there's the recently acquired Drop Deck now as well. And as GM of innovation, Olivia here is essentially the CEO of these last 2 product lines, Creator U and Drop Deck. And Olivia joins us today on the Goat to Market Show season finale episode. So Olivia, once again, welcome to the show. Our topic today is building a sales team from scratch. Why is this on your mind? Why is it important to you?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. This is very top of mind after the acquisition of Drop Deck. So we are just paywalled. We just launched about 2.5 months ago, and we're growing, which has been awesome. And we're trying to figure out what kind of our next steps look like in terms of the sales side of the house, and potentially bringing on an AE, potentially exploring kind of more enterprise-based sales or team-based sales, and digging in on all things.
We have a lot of customers at Startup Hype Man and just a lot of people in our community who are at that stage where they're trying to figure out what their sales strategy needs to be and how do they stand up a sales team, all that stuff. So this is going to be a highly relevant episode, I know, for a lot of our listeners. We're going to dive entirely into this in just a few moments. But first, let's talk about you and let's learn about Olivia, the person. Now, I mentioned in your introduction, you grew up, born and raised in DC. What's it like to grow up in a district and not a state?
Well, besides that we can't participate in federal elections, it was an awesome place to grow up. I grew up right outside of Capitol Hill, so literally within view of the Capitol. And I loved the city. It was a huge, diverse culture. It had lots and lots of different diasporas like in and around town, and I ate a lot of really great food.
Did you ever consider a career in politics?
No, never. I saw all my friends' parents. A lot of them were diplomats. A lot had political roles. It wasn't something that I was super passionate about. Both of my parents worked for the American Red Cross when I was growing up. Okay. And so I did get to experience that. They did incredible work. And I was always really proud of all the things that they had achieved at the end of the day.
So with your parents working for the Red Cross, what's 1 or 2 things that you feel either was directly taught to you or just kind of like trickled down to you that you think you carry with you today?
Yeah. So I guess on my dad's side, he would run disaster services for really big events, including Hurricane Andrew. And on his side, I think one of the things that he did just super effectively was organize and train people, like help them really understand the mission, help them really understand what they needed to do, and like kind of get everyone marching in the same order and direction. And On my mom's side, honestly, so she was in fundraising forever and she was really good at it. She actually went back to school much later in life and became a physician's assistant, worked for the Navy for a long time. And on her side, I think I just learned perseverance. I mean, she would decide to go do something and she'd go do it. And it was just incredibly inspiring from my side. So yeah, each of them did really awesome things. And I'm proud to be their kid. Old adult now, I guess. I'm not a kid anymore.
Coming into more of like your professional career, you've had a career at a lot of different, key names, Salesforce being one of them, which was, Buddy Media that got acquired by Salesforce. Curelate, you were at Facebook at one point. You've been the head of sales at Facebook/Meta. So a lot of cool things here now, obviously at SamCart. Across this, if you think back to when you were in college and you were like, oh, in my career, I'm going to do this and here's what my days are going to look like versus what your days, whether it's at SamCart now or some of the other roles you've had, how closely tied is what you thought it would be to what it actually is?
It's not tied. So I went to a Haverford College, which was an amazing liberal arts school, and you could sort of pursue all kinds of different things. And I went there going in saying I was going to be a biology major. I was going to go to med school. I was going to be a pediatric cardiologist, and ended up studying political science and sociology. I just sort of fell in love with both of them. Actually afterwards went to work for a law firm and was a paralegal. And one of the partners that I supported at the time, shout out to Adam Chase, was going to write me a review or a reference for school. And he said, I don't think you should go to law school. And I was like, what? Just took my LSAT. He's like, you really like to talk too much and you're really great at storytelling and sales and marketing. And I think you really should maybe look at account management. And they got me into my very first startup. So I ended up interviewing and going to a company called Smart Brief, who this law firm represented at the time, and loved it. Who knew? I really liked talking to people on the phone, and kind of the rest was history. So not connected in any way, shape, or form. Did not realize I was going to be in tech. Facebook launched when I was in college. So I got to experience kind of that massive shift in sort of the tech concept of a job. I don't think that was like really prevalent before this, unless you were selling, I guess, hardware. I'm glad I did.
That's a great story. And in looking at some of the more recent roles you've had, and even being like head of sales at Meta on their SMB team, as we we'll get more into our conversation today around building a sales team, but Meta is a massive organization, right? 10,000 plus employees, I think. How do you do something like from zero, essentially, inside of such a big organization?
Yeah. So Meta is 50,000, I think, plus.
Is it that much? Okay.
It's that big. It's a huge company. And it's funny that you asked that. I got tapped. They posted a job for this role leading what at the time was called the lab. And it was a new kind of innovation team for quickly testing hypotheses around go-to-market for small businesses. So how did we figure out kind of the next wave of what our sales strategy should look like for small businesses? What were the products that we needed to sell? How did we talk about them? How did we approach those conversations? What resources were needed, et cetera? And this had never existed. And I was thinking to myself, man, this is kind of like running a startup within this like huge organization. This should be super fun. And I met with my VP at the time, Rich Rao, and he actually has an engineering background and ended up in sales, which I always thought was sort of an interesting shift and dynamic for him. And he said to me, well, you get to be a VC here. You choose where you want to kind of allocate your resources to all of these different startup tests based on hypotheses. And he said, I really hope you fail more than you succeed. What? What do you mean? He was like, well, if you're failing all the time, you're taking really big swings. And so I hope you fail 10 times. And the one time you succeed, you absolutely knock it out of the park. And that was really scary. And so I really pushed the team that we then assembled kind of around this innovation group to really think about failures and celebrate failures and figure out why and what we needed to do next and all of the other things. And I think in some ways that mindset has then carried me into going back into the startup world and really being comfortable with the fact that like you've got to make lots and lots and lots of and do lots and lots and lots of incremental tests to really understand like where is this going to work and where is it not going to work at the end of the day. So that was really fun to take from 0 to 1. It still exists. That team is awesome. Shout out to the lab, Meta. And I hope that they're still failing all the time, to be honest with you.
So SamCart, you've been at the company since, early part of 2023. You're heading up 2 different product lines. I gave a very brief introduction in the beginning, but could you maybe just expand for our listeners on the background of SamCart and then specifically these individual product lines?
Yeah. So SamCart was founded by 2 brothers who were teaching baseball tactics, especially around hitting, I think at the time. And they were selling it via video content and they could not figure out a good e-commerce platform to do this on. And out of that was born SamCart. And so they decided to try and figure out how to really enable digital sales. So you don't have a product catalog and all these other things. It's really the online sale of a PDF or a video or a subscription to something, et cetera. And out of that, SamCart was born. It's now an incredibly robust tool. You check out anywhere is kind of the big key of it because at this point in time, having a page building tool doesn't really go that far. Your audience really wants to buy wherever they want to buy. And so being able to distribute that is super awesome and has continued to just explode in terms of adoption and more importantly, enablement of people at the end of the day. And there's about 50 million creators, people who identify creators. And I think that number is growing tremendously every single day as people become side hustlepreneurs or, solopreneurs or, want to just get out of kind of the rat race. And of those, about 47 million of them really haven't sold much. And that was identified about 1.5 years ago. And as a result, Creator U was born. And Creator U is an online platform and set of tools for creators to learn how to become creators. How do you grow your audience? How do you think through developing your content that you're going to sell? How do you know what niche is the right niche? Like, how do you actually sell at the end of the day? And so it's got social dashboards for kind of tracking performance. There's an AI assistant in there to help you think through writing ebooks or video sales pages, et cetera. And it's a tool that's growing every single day and has tons of users, which is really awesome. And then about 7 months ago or so, 8 months ago, our CEO, Justin Smith, I guess was like deep on Reddit somewhere and read about DropDeck and got curious and reached out to these guys. They were based in Europe and said, we really want to kind of in conjunction with teaching people how to become creators, also give them the tools for really making beautiful content that they can in fact sell. And DropDeck was doing just that. And at the time it was just presentations. The idea of being, AI and generative and all this stuff is being thrown around kind of everywhere. But the DropDeck backstory was, 2 engineering and product people who were asked to make decks all the time and hated doing it. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of energy. You would think through what it was going to look like and it would come out looking like shit, honestly. And it was just really, really hard to cobble your content into templates. And so they built this platform where they could just start typing their ideas and it would generate really beautiful content out of these ideas. And instead of it being a template where you have to kind of go in and try to mash all your stuff into what it already looks like, it actually creates this content for you. And then you can design it, play with it, et cetera. And so Justin saw these guys, reached out. The rest is history. We ended up acquiring them. And yeah, we've the product is now live. It does ebooks and kind of brochures, and it also does obviously presentations and a whole bunch more to come in the coming months, which is really awesome and exciting.
So with the right understanding of the company, let's get into our main feature conversation here, which is around, what you've been embarking on at SamCart and what you previously did at Meta, which is building a sales team from scratch. First thing I want to ask here is, especially as a company is on their initial come up, it's oftentimes founder-led sales. At the same time, there are a lot of scenarios where you have founders who have no experience selling, are scared of it. They want to outsource or hire it out like immediately. They don't want to do it at all because it's just not their thing, What's your stance here? Is it necessary? Is it vital for a founder to be selling their own product, at least at the start?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is, if you're a founder, you're already a salesperson. You've had to convince people to work with you or partner with you on things. You may have gotten funding, so you had to convince VCs to actually give you some money. You may have gotten partners. You've had to convince those partners to work with you. You hopefully have hired one or two, you maybe have hired 1 and 2 employees, and you've convinced them to come on board. And all of that is actually sales. So at the end of the day, I think it's really important for founders to be comfortable with their own kind of sales narrative and story. That's not easy. It's not like it's the most comfortable thing on the planet, but I would argue that founders also have one other like really key trait to being a great salesperson, which is hopefully really deep curiosity. If they've gotten to the point where they've got a product they can go sell, they've spent a lot of time thinking about the problem that they're solving at the end of the day. And so like they're effectively you're already a salesperson if that's kind of the jump. And so what I say to most founders who are trying to kind of grapple with this and they're not super comfortable with it is like, you've got to get comfortable because you're doing it all the time. Like in every role that you play as the founder of a company, you actually are selling people on taking some sort of action or another, which is really important. And you've got to practice. And I really recommend practicing, whether that's, recording yourself and watching it back, or it's pitching it to your friends, having just like a mini scorecard that your kind of 2-liner really well and what you do really well. And what problem you solve really well are like the 2 core ingredients to that. But you're already doing it. So you should keep doing it and keep testing it and trying it, because it's only going to make, when you do decide, or if you decide to bring on a sales team, like way more impactful at the end of the day.
So when then does it actually make sense? And is it based on timeline? Is it based on amount of traction? Is it something else? When does it make sense to now think beyond yourself as the founder and say, we got to start hiring people to do this?
I think it depends obviously on what your motion looks like first and foremost. So if you're a product-led growth situation and you're getting people in because of the product, and maybe you've got a freemium-like model, it probably doesn't make sense until you're in a place where you're finding that you've got this opportunity to go further. Meaning that you've got people coming in, they're seeing that aha moment, they're getting other people potentially at their organization in and using the product. And you're like, okay, we've got to figure this out. Now, those roles are really interesting because that is almost an expansion like role, as opposed to like a hard and fast, outbound AE. When you're bringing someone on in that instance, you're bringing someone on who's really diving deep on use cases and understanding these businesses and building, relationships and key stakeholders internally. And it's a really different motion. Now, if you are a sales-led growth, you need to get out and get in front of people. You may need to bring someone on earlier than if you're in the product-led growth world. And that's because you may need more of the hard and fast person who can actually go after, from like an SDR perspective, for example, the right people to start getting them on the phone to really be testing out this pitch and trying to figure out all of those things. And there's no hard and fast timeline there. I think once it becomes more than 25% of your time, it's probably time to start looking for maybe bringing someone else on board. Or if when you're really having conversations, you're seeing that there is a repeatable process there, then it's also probably time to try and bring somebody else on board to see if you can scale that up at the end of the day. So
now we have to think about who these people are actually going to be, right? Mm-hmm. Who you're bringing onto the team. There's a handful of questions I want to ask around this. The first one I'll start with is, setting up the hiring process in the first place. What advice do you have here? Is it, to ask people first? Is it post? Do you pay money to post on Indeed? What's your opinion of the right path to go about this?
So I think the first part, yes, I mean, always use your network. I think that there's like sort of a no-brainer there in terms of just being able to have those conversations and think through it. I also think even to this day, I think I have quite a lot of experience in go-to-market. And to this day, I meet up with other friends who are also in the go-to-market space to like bounce ideas and figure out if I'm thinking about something the right way, or am I missing something they may flag to me. And I think that that's always really valuable and important as well. But yes, I think at the end of the day, if you're on the product-led side, I think what you're looking for more is almost an account management background. So they're really focused on expansion. They're really focused on digging deep on use cases and figuring out how to better prop those up or better align them to the product or bring in more people as a result. They're really focused on mapping organizations. So you need to know who you need to get to in order for that to become kind of a bigger part of the sales process. And then they're figuring out how to get referrals through that. So, if your friend likes it, they may refer you to the next person, et cetera. And so, I think that can be a sales background. It can be an account management background, but it's somebody who's deeply curious about the customer at the end of the day. And the focus maybe isn't actually on that first contract. The focus is on that huge contract that's coming way down the line where you're continuing to grow and grow and grow. And that expansion base is what you're going after. If you're on the sales-led side, I think you're also focused on deeply curious people. But I would also say you're focused on people who are persistent and they kind of have the hustle. And they're sort of willing to just ask. Like the worst case scenario is someone says no, right? When you're in sales. And even when someone says no, there are paths after that. And so finding people who are comfortable with hearing a no, willing to move on to the next thing, and also willing to just try new stuff will go a really long way in helping you ultimately get to the right people. So that's how I sort of think about those roles based on how you're going to market, differentiating and who you might be looking for each.
What's your stance on, like, I've got an opinion on this and I'll share it, but I want to hear your stance. Getting someone who has a big logo attached to their name, meaning like maybe they did sales for Salesforce or for some massive company like Intel, right? A place like that, where you say, oh, they did it for Intel. They're an A+ player over here. What's your stance on going for that as kind of a lead indicator?
I think in most cases, especially when it's a first hire or a very early hire, that you're not going to have any process. You won't have any kind of deeply defined funnel. You won't have any kind of basic forecasting yet. You may have pieces of all of these things, but you're not going to have a lot of them, and you're going to need somebody to come in and help with that. Now, I think having an understanding of some of those processes from other places is really important, but you building that and holding yourself accountable to it is very, very different. And so I think on the whole, I tend to shy away from very early hires having big logos, because I don't necessarily think that that's ultimately, those roles are so well defined. They know exactly what to do and when to do it and how, that getting somebody into a world where they have sort of no definition could be really, really challenging at the end of the day. That's not to say that they can't do it. There could be other reasons to bring them in, like they really know deeply about a specific industry and they're showing that hustle or something else, sure. But on the whole, I think that's not where I would start in terms of a first hire.
I share that same belief. That person is likely really strong at executing on a designed playbook.
Yep.
But their figure out ability quotient, if you will, is quite low. And they will not only not know what to do, but also get quite frustrated the second they're like, hey, I need a case study for this. And you're like, we don't have that.
Yeah, that definitely happens. And, it's interesting that you say that, because one question that I like to ask during interviews is what do you do when you hear no? I'm just curious always, like, what do you do when you hear no? What's your next move? And obviously different people have very different answers to that. Some of them are really baked. It's like, oh, well, then I do blah, blah, blah. And like, they have a very strict process for it. Other people like that question sort of flusters them. And then some people, the first thing out of their mouth is like, oh, I hear it all the time. And, I segment those people into 3 buckets, and then they start talking through it. And you're like, that's what you need. Because it's the like kind of learning behind the no that's always crucial. Understanding how they get there, how persistent are they? Sometimes that's good. Sometimes knowing when to walk away is really important. But ultimately, across all of those things, it shows a lot of self-awareness. And I think in first sales hire, a real understanding of self-awareness, a real ability to critique themselves, improve themselves, et cetera, is really, really important, because sales is a hard job. It is a lot of rejection, basically. And if you're really self-aware about where you're good, where you're bad, where you want improvement, or you need to go out and seek help, you're going to be an incredibly strong salesperson at the end of the day.
So if the answer to what do you do when you hear no is I rage and I just start like breaking things, you probably are not.
Doesn't go well. You'd be surprised what people say, though. Honestly, it's been it's a really interesting question to ask people. Ask it in your next interview, see what happens.
I really do like that question. So one of the things that you mentioned before was like this new person coming in, you're probably not going to have a process built out. And for everyone listening, as you think about your sales process and who that first hire is going to be, it's also important to understand, is the product that they're selling living up to its name? And is it something that they can stand behind and is not going to break the second that they sell a customer? You want to make sure your product is strong, so that way you can ultimately grow your sales. And to make sure your product is strong, you need a partner to make sure that that product's going to be strong. And that partner goes by the name of Akava. They're your partner to help you go from 0 to 1. So, as you know, I like to say, whether that's blockchain or no chain, Web3 or Web2, mobile apps or SaaS, Akava builds it at startup speed and enterprise level refinement. That's why hundreds of startups trust them, like Stride, Haveno, Olive, Side, and so many more, all the way from their first dollar up to their $1 billion valuation. And they are ready to help you become the GOAT to market. And how are they going to do that right away? Well, they've got a killer offer for you. It's called a You Call It code review. What is a You Call It code review? Well, for those who qualify, Akava will review the most critical parts of your code so you can see exactly what your tech needs to either initially launch or scale up after launch. And they will do this completely free. And then you call it from there. It's kind of like, that Friday night at the bar where it's like, you call it well drinks. Think of it like that. It's a You Call It code review. So you want to understand the critical aspects of your code. And then do you want to handle it on your own from there? Great. You call it. You want to take it somewhere else entirely and have someone else develop it? Great. You call it. You want Akava's development help with it? You call it. You call the shots here. It's a You Call It code review. I don't think anyone else offers that. And that's why from day one, they're such a strong partner to have. We refer startups to them all the time, and they have saved several from potential doomsday scenarios with code they were using that was offshore developed and was quite hollow. And they were building things on a house of cards without realizing it. So Akava is there to help make sure that doesn't happen to you. And that as you bring on that sales team, as you bring on that marketing team, there's a real product behind what they're selling. And it's not just smoke mirrors and something that's going to collapse. Ready to see if you qualify for a You Call It code review? Just head to akava.io. That's akava.io, akava.io, and tell them Startup Hype Man sent you. Today on the Goat to Market Show season finale episode, we're with Olivia Herron from SamCart, and we're talking through how to build a sales team from scratch. Now, before the break there, Olivia, you had mentioned this notion of like, hey, this first person who comes in is not necessarily going to have an entirely built out process. So do you think is it okay to hire someone whose goal is to sell, but also be like, hey, you kind of got to figure out what the process is to sell this thing? Or should you have some element of a playbook that you're giving to them?
It's of course helpful to have an element of the playbook. I think the big things that you should establish, I would hope that a founder would establish before bringing someone on board is sort of like, what are the key pain points, obviously, that you're solving for at the end of the day. If you can have a pretty crisp ICP that you're going after in terms of who you need to be talking to get this done. And crisp ICP is a tricky one. I think a lot of people will say like, oh, well, anybody who, for drop deck, great example, anybody who builds a deck or anybody who builds a presentation should be using drop deck. It's like, okay, well, that's so broad. It's really hard to then harness in on like, well, who do you actually want to be doing this and why? And so going through that motion and really spending time looking at who are the customers that you may already have on board, what were the things that were sort of similar across them, and where can you really further define that so that you're not just in some sort of terrible spray and pray mode, will ensure that your win rate goes up, honestly, and you're really executing well at the end of the day. So yeah, knowing the value prop, really understanding your ICPs, and then hopefully you've got one or two revs under your belt in terms of just pitching and having those conversations. And when you get this person on board, continuing to work with them to refine that will be really important. I do think that, setting goals will be critical to bringing this person on board as well. So you can't be in a situation where you bring them on and you're expecting them to suddenly be closing deals. Like that's not going to happen. And so we talk a lot about kind of productivity metrics as the first part of that in terms of the sales funnel. And then maybe obviously later down the line, getting to a place where you're sort of more quota driven because you've got a repeatable process that will lead to the outcomes that you need at the end of the day.
So one of the things we did here, a couple episodes ago, we had as a guest Whitney Dermick, who joined our company as employee number one recently. And while she's creating pitches on behalf of clients, she's also stepped into a sales role as well. And one of the things is, and this is where I think it's really tough. Like you can tell yourself, oh, I need to have a playbook ready for this person or, a roadmap ready for them. And it just, there's a million reasons why it doesn't end up happening. Most of which is it's really hard if you're the founder to know, like to take that time out and be like, I'm going to sit down and do this. Cause you just don't even know where to start usually. One of the things that Whitney did was she actually just took it upon herself to build, like she sat in on like a half dozen calls and then just built out a playbook and then showed it to me and was like, okay, what do we need to tweak in this? Mm-hmm. And that worked really well as a step one to not only have her get direct exposure to what the sales process is like, but to take ownership and build the playbook. And now it's her playbook, right? And she has her name to it. I think it makes and it has made sort of the onboarding, if you will, for sales a lot easier because it's not a quote unquote script or I'll use the word again, a playbook that's given to her saying, hey, learn this. If she was the active creator of it, the knowledge retention is so much easier because it was her sitting down and typing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I firmly believe in that too. I think it depends on the hire, obviously, and who you get on board. But to that effect, the playbook creation is really important. I think that the product knowledge is really important, really early. I think the more that you encourage this person to like really deeply understand this product, use it themselves, dog food, see if you have something like a full story or you have a way of watching other customers do it, because to that point, you're internalizing the problems that you're solving for them. And then you can speak to it like a human, not like, an enterprise sales robot. Like you can say like, oh, I tried to create this deck the other day. It was awful. Here's how I actually did this, in drop deck or whatever the case may be. And that becomes so much more real. And I tell founders this too. I mean, like, I think at the end of the day, like you're a human and it's okay to be a human. And so to the question or like way earlier about, getting into the sales cycle when you don't feel like a salesperson, tell your founder story. There's a reason why you did this. It's a lot of work to be a founder. You don't just like fall into that. You make a conscious commitment to like being a founder at the end of the day. And like, telling that story will resonate with the people it's supposed to resonate with. And it means that you've found the right ICP and you can really be curious and dig into their problems. And that's a whole world that I think people struggle with. And so I totally agree to your ownership comment, like being able to tell stories in your own words, using your own narrative because it's impacting you is way easier than attempting to, follow a script at the end of the day, and more authentic.
Mm-hmm. And so let me potentially combat this a little bit in that I think product knowledge is important. I would almost make the case, though, that if you educate them more, or they get educated about it on their own, but if there's more emphasis on the market problem or problem set, that's more important than knowing everything about the product. Agree, disagree?
It's more important. I'm not sure I would agree that it's more. I guess what I would say is it's equally, and you could say maybe which one comes first. So to your comment, like I do think that really deeply understanding the industry and really being able to drive discovery is really important. And to your point, you can only do that if you actually understand the industry or the problem sets, et cetera. And then the product knowledge can and should follow, but also you definitely want to be in a situation where you can answer questions. And I don't mean that. And like, of course, if you don't know something, you can say, let me get back to you on that. And that's okay. But I do think you want to also establish yourself as an authority in that process. And that authority should come with your product in mind, obviously. And if you don't know the pieces of that, that can be problematic too. So I think early conversation, the product knowledge can come like over time as you learn it better, et cetera, like it will definitely come. And especially when you're an early company, your early salespeople are going to know everything about your product because they've had a long, long time with it, which is awesome. And yes, you're right. Industry knowledge and really digging into those discovery questions is incredibly important in those early conversations too.
Let's hit on the aspect of goals you mentioned before, right? When it's a founder selling, I mean, generally like what revenue numbers you're trying to hit, but you're not necessarily, and most likely, you don't have yourself on a quota.
Yeah.
You don't, if it's a down month, you don't put yourself on a PIP, if you will. How do you even figure out what goals to set, like what category of metric, KPIs, et cetera, when you bring in this first person to be like, this is an accurate way of grading performance?
Yeah. So again, it's always going to vary, product led versus sales led, for example. And so on the sales led side, I think it's relatively straightforward. You're looking at productivity from a true kind of outbounding perspective, usually, where you're thinking through, okay, who do I need to go after? How frequently am I touching them? What are those conversations looking like? Are these value props resonating? Are you getting people on the phone at the end of the day? And what's that looking like? And you're again looking for commonalities in all of these conversations and starting to get to a place where you've got a repeatable process at hand, right? Like, oh, this worked this time. Can we do this again? It didn't work that time, but it was this one step that didn't work. Okay, let's do this again and change that one step. And you're kind of marching in that direction. And so usually productivity focused, very outbound focused on the sales led side of the KPIs. And so it's just like, and this can be really basic, like how many conversations are you having a week? Like, it doesn't have to be how many emails did you send? It can literally be how many times did you get someone on a call, for example? Like, what did those calls lead to? And then, slowly making your way kind of up a ladder, so to speak, in terms of building out your top of funnel, and then also building out, obviously, the conversion at the bottom of the funnel. So kind of going up and down, I guess. On the product led side, I've been thinking a lot about this as we onboard someone to DropDeck, and we're going to look for sort of similar things. So one of the things that we're going to do is really look at getting on the phone with people who've had access to a product for a certain period of time. So you've signed up, we have a free trial situation. You've had access for 4 days. Have you built anything? Like giving them a call and just, again, really being curious and really using that for discovery opportunity. People who have actually converted from the trial, same thing. So it's going to be a little bit more focused on insights. And again, hard to quantify from like a specific KPI. It's not like, oh, we've gotten 7 insights on yada, yada, but it's more like, who are these people and what do they look like? And we're trying to crisp up even our ICP. So can we use this to do some of that? Is there a target market we want to go after where this really does solve a pain point? It's a little bigger than X, it's a little smaller than Y. So yeah, it'll be heavily focused on more of that kind of relationship aspect and really just understanding use cases, driving product insights that we can hopefully give back to the product team. And then same thing, starting to kind of build that pipeline from there on people who are interested in, further expansion of the product and across their team, et cetera.
Now, is there a blanket amount of time that you should be setting to say, I should know by this point if this is working out or not?
That's a good question. I always think that time constraining something is a good idea. I don't think it's a definitive, I know by this point this has happened or this hasn't happened. I think what it would more be is just like, you should have some tripwires though. Like you've got a couple of tripwires along the way that like.
I can tell you're in e-commerce if you use the phrase tripwire.
I actually, it's funny. I actually use it when I'm talking to people about their careers and whether or not they're deciding to leave a company, for example. It's like, hey, set some tripwires. If X happens or Y happens, like make a decision. And I think the same holds true, honestly, for sales teams. So you've got a couple moments in time where it's like, hey, we've got a defined date that we're going to review what's happening. And then it's like, okay, if things look like this, let's move over here. If things don't look like this, let's go back. Now, I will say one thing that's really interesting is I think going from a PLG motion and adding in sales is really easy, or easier, I guess I would say. I will say starting as a sales-led motion and attempting to sort of move backwards into a PLG motion, I think is harder, to be honest with you, for a whole bunch of different reasons. And so I do think like things like, how do you want to be perceived in the market and what do those conversations need to look like, are critical to define upfront. It's why you being the founder and sort of having those conversations, those sales conversations early days is important, because those motions are incredibly different and mixing them is hard, and on both sides, honestly. And I do think going from sales led back to PLG is a lot harder than the other way around.
I got 2 more quick questions before we hit our wrap up. One is, we've talked a lot about the first sales hire. Technically, the title of this episode is around building a sales team from scratch. So after hire number 1, are you looking for that same person in a different body? Or are you looking for more dynamic input?
Yeah, that's a good, I think you're always looking for a complement, right? So you will get one salesperson on board early days who is really strong at X, having conversations and developing storylines and marketing effect. They're really, really good at marketing. Maybe they're not as strong on the process side. They don't have a lot of process tactic. They're doing it, but it's not where you need it to be in terms of continued measurement. So maybe in the next salesperson, you look for somebody who's got a little bit more of a structured sales background, who really understands how the components should work together and what you want to be tracking. And hopefully the marketing person is helping them with them being really good storytellers, and the process person is helping the marketing person with getting this really on track. So I do think of people as overlap, but complement. And when you're building a team, so like there's overlapping things that you must have in some of these people. And then there's all kinds of complementing things along the way. And you should be looking for those different pieces. Depending on how the salesperson is doing, you may also be in a situation where you brought in an AE first and they were doing all of the outbound plus all of the calls. And then you may be saying, okay, they're getting so many calls and they're doing so great in closing. We need somebody dedicated entirely just to this sort of outbound motion. And then you're bringing on kind of a complementing SDR who can help this AE have more conversations, really dig in with these customers, et cetera, and taking some of the like work of getting the meetings on in the first place off of their plate. But it depends a little bit on like what's happening with your business. Are you getting a lot of inbound? You may not need an SDR immediately. You may need 2 AEs. Are you not getting as much inbound, but your AE's kind of killing it when they do get on a call? Okay, then it's time to explore the SDR and figure out how to get more happening from that perspective. So that's how there's lots of different pieces, but usually it's not 2 of the same unless you're in some sort of magical world of just tons of inbound and you're like, I got to get on the call with all of these people. Like, how do I make this happen quickly?
So then my last question before we head to our wrap up is, when you're building up this team, is it a slow, gradual fade out of the founder exiting sales themselves? Or is it you make that first hire and they get 100% of it and the founder should quit selling?
I think founders should stay involved in sales for as long as possible, honestly, as a means of being connected to the customer. Now, that does not mean that they're driving the deal. Those are different, right? You know, a founder can be brought in strategically to up-level a conversation or to get you to the right executive or whatever the case may be. But the desire to stay as close as possible to your customers, I hope never goes away. You know, I know Justin Smith, for example, like still takes calls with creators to just figure out what they're doing because it's worth it for him to really deeply understand, you know, the problems that they're facing and what they're going through. I do think that like obviously stepping away and giving them space to execute is really important, but I think that deep tie to like what is happening with the customer, oftentimes which comes through your sales team, is really, really valuable and something you should hold on to while you can and as long as you can, and even when your company is enormous at the end of the day. And even the VPs at Facebook got on calls with small businesses all the time. No question. They wanted to get on calls. They really deeply wanted to understand, were they pitching and selling? No, they were doing kind of the most fundamental thing of sales, which was discovery and really deeply being curious about what's happening and really making it worth their time because they could tie the needs of these customers back to everything we were doing from operations all the way through like the content we were producing at the end of the day to make sure we were relevant and valuable for these people.
Let's begin our wrap up. First off, Olivia, where can our listeners find you? Where can they learn more? And where can they learn more about SamCart and DropDeck and all the good stuff?
Definitely. You can find me on LinkedIn and you can dig into all things SamCart on samcart.com. dropdeck.com and creatoru.com, great places to go and just see what's happening. The SamCart blog is particularly awesome, has lots of great content for people who are creators, becoming creators, thinking about how to drive the most from their business at the end of the day.
Who is one person who you want to give a shout out to who's been influential in your journey?
Man, I think I'll give a shout out to Emery Rosansky. She is now the VP of go-to-market at First Round, but I had the chance to work with her at actually not one, but 2 different startups in my career. And she's just been an incredibly valuable friend and valuable coworker, and ultimately someone I've learned a ton from. She has great content on the First Round website about, starting go-to-market, questions that she gets from early founders. I would absolutely go check her out. I think she's just got great advice.
We'll now do our top 1 or 2 lessons or takeaways for the listeners based on the discussion today. I'll go first, then I'll toss it over to you. The topic today was building a sales team from scratch. We covered a lot of ground. One thing I want to make sure people don't forget coming out of this is the interview question you mentioned. So when hiring for a sales role, ask in the interview, what do you do when you hear no? Olivia, top 1 or 2 lessons or takeaways for the listeners.
I think my first sort of lesson or takeaway is like, don't be afraid of sales. You're doing it all the time. And one of the reasons that you become a founder is because you're deeply curious. Like, lean in hard to being curious when you're on the phone with your customers, and lean in hard to the impact of the problems that they're flagging to you so that you can quantify those and really show how your product will work for them at the end of the day and the impact your product actually will have on those things. So that's one big thing. And the other one is just thinking through defining who you need on your team. So if you're on the PLG side, thinking through kind of that account management role and the qualities that or attributes that come with those types of people versus this like kind of hard outbound selling motion and the attributes and qualities that may come with that people. And really understanding how you want to go to market will really help you get the right hire the first time to execute against kind of what that vision will look like at the end of the day.
My final question, which is how we end every episode on this show. Fill in the blank, Olivia. Entrepreneurship is blank.
Entrepreneurship is a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. You're going to get it eventually. It's just going to take you a while to fit all those pieces together.
1,000-piece. We haven't gotten that one yet. 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. I love it. She is Olivia Herron with SamCart. And guess what, everybody? If you're listening to this and you had questions that came up, you're like, oh, I wish he would ask this, or I wish I had a chance to ask her this. You have that opportunity, because coming up the entire first week that this episode airs, Olivia is hopping into Goat to Market Club for an Ask Me Anything. Think of it like the official after party of the podcast. So you got more questions around building a sales team. Olivia is there you can ask her anything. You got questions about why she knew at age 3 she didn't want to go into politics. You can ask her more questions on that. You're going to ask about the American Red Cross. You can ask her anything on that. She's here to help and answer your questions and Ask Me Anything, happening the entire first week that this episode goes live, only inside of Goat to Market Club. That's our online founder community. Joining is easy. Just head to startuphypeman.com/GTM-club, startuphypeman.com/GTM-club. That'll tie a bow and put a pin on this season of the Goat to Market show. Thank you again, Olivia, for joining us on our season finale episode. And everybody out there, don't worry. The next season is coming soon. We've got a special next season of this show where it's going to be a Making the Goat series, or a season rather. We're going to take you behind the scenes of the creation of the first ever startup hip hop album, appropriately titled Goat to Market. Thanks again, Olivia.
Thank you. Have a good one.
That does it for this week's episode. Thank you again to our guest for joining and sharing their knowledge. Did you like what you heard? Well, leave us a rating and review on your podcast app before you head out of here. And while you're at it, who's one friend who you think would find value in hearing today's conversation? Go ahead and share the episode with them. I would really appreciate it, and I thank you for doing that. Remember, we've got more going down with our guest inside Goat to Market Club. Think of it like the after show, the after party, the after hours special. Our guest is going to hop inside the club and do an Ask Me Anything. So you can follow up with any of those questions that came to mind as you were listening. You can follow up and ask them to our guest inside our club. To join, just head to startuphypeman.com/GTM-club. startuphypeman.com/GTM-club. GTM Club is $9 a month, but your first month is free. You can cancel anytime, and you're not only getting the AMAs, you're also getting our monthly strategy drops that are for members only, where we're teaching hyper-specific tactical go-to-market strategies, plus cool member-to-member interactions and other bonus resources. All of that happens inside the club. So again, startuphypeman.com/GTM-club. We'll see you inside the club, and we'll see you next week. But before you head out, remember, why be a unicorn when you can be the GOAT?